I'd like to start by getting us all to step back in history for a moment. Did you know that almost exactly 100 years ago, everyone used to work 6 days a week, with Sunday reserved as the day for going to church? After a major campaign by the trade unions and some progressive businesses, the weekend was one for all workers between the 1920s and 1940s. One of the earliest pioneers was Ford Motor Company in the United States of America. In 1926, Ford became the first major company in America to adopt a 5-day, 40-hour week for workers in its factories. Although working hours were reduced, productivity went up, profits went up, and manufacturers all over the country soon followed Ford's lead. 100 years later, and the 9-to-5, 5-day working week that we all know still remains the dominant model of work across most of the world, despite the fact it was designed for the more industrial and agricultural economy we had at the time. Now, the world of work has completely transformed since then. No one can argue against that. So why are we still working a very similar amount of hours as we were 100 years ago? The 9-to-5, 5-day working week is outdated and no longer fit for purpose. And nothing showed us more than COVID that the world of work can change very, very quickly when we want it to. Since the 1980s, working hours in this country have barely reduced at all. Workers are a lot more productive than they were a few decades ago. Just think about the smartphones and the speed at which we can respond to an email in our pockets. But none of these productivity gains have gone back to workers through more free leisure time. And I can tell you where these productivity gains have gone. They've gone towards greater company profits. When you take into account all of the additional labour added to the workforce as a result of women joining the workforce in huge numbers, it's even more shocking. Despite all of these extra hours being put in, working hours just haven't reduced accordingly. And so it would all be much easier to accept if living standards were rising, but the opposite is happening. Living standards are falling. In the UK, we now work some of the longest hours in the world, and it's even worse when compared with our European neighbours. We work the longest full-time hours compared to nearly every country in the European Union, while at the same time, we have one of the least productive economies. So all these long working hours we're putting in are not producing good results for the economy. What they are producing, however, is a workforce where millions are burnt out, stressed, and overworked. To rub it in, we also have the fewest number of bank holidays. According to the Health and Safety Executive, 18 million working days are lost every single year as a result of work-related stress, depression, or anxiety. Furthermore, the World Health Organization has shown how long working hours are killing hundreds of thousands of people a year globally through stroke and heart disease. It's time for change, and we're long overdue an update. Last year, we ran the biggest ever trial of a 4-day working week with no loss of pay to take place anywhere in the world so far. It involved 61 companies, 2,900 workers, and the trials lasted for around 6 months. I came up with the idea of running a big trial in the UK after speaking on an event on a panel in London when I was challenged by a businessman. I remember it very well. I was pointing out all these trials that had taken place all over the world in countries like Iceland and said, look, it's been overwhelmingly successful. But he said, just because it works in Iceland, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work here in the UK. And I remember very well, I remember thinking at the time, you know what, fair enough, he's got a point. But after that event, I wanted to set out to prove that it could work here in the UK. One of the most exciting parts of the pilot for me was the fact that we had a really diverse range of companies represented from all sorts of different sectors of the economy. We had manufacturing, retail, healthcare, finance, charities. We even had a fish and chip shop and a brewery. So what were the results? At the end of the trial, remarkably, almost every company, 92%, decided to continue with the 4-day week. Of the 61 companies that participated, at least 56 decided to continue. But the full results are best understood by breaking down the results into the impact on workers, the workers taking part, and the impact on the organisation. So let's have a quick look at more detail at the impact on workers. There was a 71% reduction in burnout. Stress reduced by 39%, and workers found it much easier to balance work with both family and social commitments. The time that men spent looking after children, doing childcare, increased by more than double that of women, which just goes to show the impact that a 4-day week can have on gender equality. And finally, there were significant reported improvements in life satisfaction. Now, for me, this is really important because what the 4-day week is ultimately about is giving us the time to be able to live happier and more fulfilled lives. Now let's turn to the impact on the organisation. The vast majority of companies were satisfied not only that business performance and productivity had been maintained, but in many cases had even improved. Workers working much more productively when they're better rested, they tend to work more efficiently. Companies' revenue rose, so the companies were making more money than they were when they were working a 5-day week. The number of sick days reduced by 65%. And finally, there was a 57% improvement in job retention, so the ability to hold on to kind of your best staff and all of your team members. Just to bring this last point to life a little bit, when Atom Bank, who are one of the largest UK 4-day week employers, when they moved to a 4-day week, they found that after just 3 months of adopting it and publicising it, their job applications, their organisation rose by 500% in just 3 months. It just goes to show how popular it is with workers. I do understand, however, on the face of it, that it can seem counterintuitive, that working less hours on the same pay can result in greater productivity. But there is surmounting evidence that proves the hypothesis. The answer is working smarter, not harder. And as we found, there are various methods that can be utilised to improve business performance to make the 4-day week a reality. As someone who gets to work a 4-day week myself, I can't put into words the difference it has made for my life. It's also made me much more focused and much more efficient at work, and also more motivated. When I come back into work on a Monday morning after a 3-day weekend, I can tell you I'm a lot more motivated for work. And there's no amount of money that I would take to go back to working 5 days a week. So the results of the UK pilot mirror the results seen in trials that have taken place all over the world now, in countries like Iceland and elsewhere. Alongside this, there's many, many more companies that begin to both trial and both adopt a 4-day working week. Most notably Unilever in New Zealand and Australia, Panasonic in Japan, Bolt and Kickstarter in America, and Atom Bank here in the UK. In England, we've also seen the first local council trial get underway, again with overwhelmingly successful results so far. So well done, I want to say well done to South Cambridgeshire District Council, who are the first council to trial a 4-day week in this country. The 4-day week is now more popular than it ever has been, with polling showing that consistently more than 2/3 of the country support such a move. When you break down those demographics, it's very, very popular across the board, but it's even more popular with Gen Z and millennials. Now this is because my generation and the generation below me do not want our lives to be defined by work in the same way that we've seen it has been for our parents and our grandparents' generation. And this is really, really important. There are many, many, many benefits of a 4-day week, and I want to just name just a few of them. Improved work-life balance, increased productivity, and a reduced carbon footprint, because if we have more time on our hands, we have the ability to live more sustainably. Better employee recruitment and retention, an increase in gender equality, decrease in unemployment, more time to spend in our communities, and finally, more time to participate in democratic institutions. There's so many benefits to a 4-day week. So many. If you're not convinced by now, then one of the final things I want to say is that artificial intelligence means a 4-day working week could be inevitable anyway. When you take into account all the increased automation and new technology still to come, a shorter working week is going to be a necessity for sharing a diminishing amount of work more equally across the economy. So rather than being scared of artificial intelligence taking away all our jobs, shorter working week could allow us to embrace this new technology. At the 4-day week campaign, we're campaigning for a 4-day week to become the normal way of working by the end of this decade. Now that may sound unrealistic, but the public believe it is possible. But at the end of the day, the 4-day week is ultimately a choice about what kind of society we want to live in. It is a choice about whether to prioritise work or life. So we want to continue on this path of busyness, distraction, and with little sense of our community around us, or can we step back, slow down, and give ourselves the time and the space to focus more on the joy, community, and companionship that we all seek in our lives? Now that's not to say that joy can't arise at work, but it's usually love, family, friendship, community, and nature that offers true joy. Just imagine how much happier we'd all be if we had a 3-day weekend every single week. Our addiction to work that takes precedence above everything else has got to change. The question I want to ask is, why is being busy all the time seen as a badge of honour in today's society? The this is surely a sign of an unhealthy culture. We want to work to live, not live to work, and it's in our power to start making that happen. We don't have to sit around waiting for the government to do it for us. So let's get out there, start having those conversations. Once you've persuaded your colleagues, get together to go and tell your boss, not that the 4-day week is possible, but that the 4-day week is already on the way.